Welcome to Layer the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, another in my series of legendary live albums. These are live albums that have become historic and in a lot of ways can define a band's career. I haven't done one of these in a while, but this is a big one. I didn't know if this is one of the big legendary live albums, and that is Kiss Alive 2. I've told the story often about how I had an uncle that was only 10 years older than me, who I was around a lot, and he was really into Kiss and Ted Nugent, and I remember very clearly this album, looking at the inside of the jacket there, the pictures on the back, and just being like totally blown away by it, totally drawn into it. It just seems so incredibly cool, and this, in my opinion, is one of the greatest live albums of all time. Kiss, they sort of set the stage with their first one, Alive 1. Kiss, not able to quite break big, they release Alive 1. It takes them to another level. And then Alive 2 sort of follows in the same format. Alive 1 was from their first 3 albums, and then Alive 2 draws mostly from the next 3, which would have been Destroyer, Rock and Roll Over, and Love Gun. And depending on, I lean more towards Alive 1 because I think it's a little bit of a more metal sounding album, but there's certainly something very special about Alive 2. Haven't listened to this in a really long time, and when I put it on, I was pleasantly surprised at how well I was able to, I knew all the between song, dialogue. Any girls want to get yourself a kiss? Meet us in the ladies' room. We're going to turn the microphone over to Ace Frehley. Which, I knew every one of them. I knew what song was going to come next, and it's an album that's been burnt into my, the wires inside my brain. I've heard it so many times. And another thing that's really kind of cool and unique about this album, I think, is that the fourth side of the album is studio tracks. And I think that that's a pretty cool, because there's certainly a few songs that they could have put on this record. Like when I was doing the research for this, I saw that there were a couple songs that they played on this tour that did not make it onto the live album. Hooligan, Take Me, and Do You Love Me were songs that they played on the Love Gun tour, which is the tour that this was taken from. I guess most of the shows here were taken from the Forum. There's of course questions about, well, how live is it really? And honestly, that question, almost every live album, especially from this era, is touched up and brushed up and cleaned up in the studio. It's the nature of playing live. Live, you got microphones catching all this bleed over from all the instruments, especially a band like Kiss that was moving around a lot. And, maybe they don't get on the microphone right away. But if you listen to YouTube, go on YouTube and find videos of them from the Love Gun tour. I mean, they sound great. To me, this is Kiss at the peak of their powers, at the peak of their fame, at the peak of their musical creativity and energy and heights. And it would really be kind of starting with this record, starting with side 4 of this record, where the band would start to splinter, and they, in my opinion, they would never quite be the same as after this live record. This is the height of Kiss mania. So if you hear them live from this era, they still sound really good. So yeah, they probably touched it up, but who cares? It still sounds great. It still sounds like a live album. They mixed the crowd in there, maybe sometimes to a little bit of a ridiculous point, but I think it's cool. You should want to feel like you're in the midst of like a million people screaming and yelling and everything. I mean, I think that's the way it should be, But it feels live. It adds a little bit more energy and excitement onto the songs. There's a lot of songs on it, even though it's only 3 sides of it are live. You get 15 songs, in the live setting, and that's because most of these songs all clock in around 3 minutes and 30 seconds is roughly the average, except for except for Shock Me because of Ace's guitar solo, and God of Thunder because of Peter's drum solo. And it pretty much checks off all the big songs that you would want to hear. I would have loved to have heard Do You Love Me? Hooligan is not one of my favorite songs from them, so I think that's okay that that wasn't on here. But I mean, Detroit Rock City, I just did a video on great album openers. This is a fantastic album. It's a fantastic live album opener. It just comes blasting out of the speakers here. And as a young kid, you're watching and you want it the best. You got it. You're looking at the pictures and the album cover, and it just felt like you were right there in the crowd. I love the way Detroit Rock City moves into King of the Nighttime World. And there's just a lot of fun stuff, you know, Ladies Room, Making Love, All Right, Love Gun, just great, you know, tons of energy, Dr. Love. Christine 16, we got a little surprise for you tonight. Turn the microphone over to Ace Frehley. You know, Shock Me is awesome. You know, Ace, it also reminded me when I was listening to this that Ace he's, I don't want to say he's underrated because he certainly influenced a lot of players, but he was a guy that had his own sound. He certainly wasn't a technical guitar player by any stretch. He was a blues bass guy, pretty straightforward, but he had a great sound, and he had kind of his own kind of signature thing. You know, there's a lot of these licks in there that you hear, and it's really like, yeah, man, that's an Ace Frehley, you know, type guitar lick, and you hear that kind of all over Shock Me and his guitar solo. And Hard Luck Woman, Peter Criss on the microphone. I always thought it was cool that Kiss was kind of like the Beatles and that they had more than one vocalist, you know, Paul and Gene, the main guys, but then Peter sang, Ace sings, and, you know, Peter here on this Paul Stanley penned Rod Stewart type tribute song sounds great. Tomorrow and Tonight is fun. I Stole Your Love, Peter Criss is back for Beth. God of Thunder is really cool. I love the drum solo in it. There's like some sort of, sounds like there's an effect on the drums or something like that. And there's a spot where right after he starts playing the drum solo and he's, you know, this, you can hear somebody like yell, maybe it's Peter, I don't know, somebody in the back like, all right, you know, it's like, he's doing all the drum fills, and it just sounds really massive and just super cool sounding. What else we got here? I Want You, and it ends with Shout It Out Loud, which is kind of like the Rock and Roll All Night of, you know, this era of the band, a party anthem that they go out on. All right, then the interesting thing here is the side 4 with the studio songs. Some of these are a little throwaway, but they're generally pretty cool. I think Any Way You Want It, the Dave Clark 5 cover, is a bit of a throwaway, but All American Man I think is cool. Rockin' in the USA is a little bit of, that one I think is a little bit weak, a Simmons pen number. Larger Than Life I love. We did a Kiss Deep Cuts episode. That was one of my deep cuts. I love the part. I love the like stop-start guitar riff and the drums. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Boom, bah. And there's a spot in the song where Gene does this da-da-da-da-da-da. Oh, he makes this noise. This is just, I think it's just super cool, man. I love the groove and feel of that song. Rock and Ride is awesome. It's a total Ace Frehley. It would become sort of like Ace's signature song. Baby Wants a Ride, She Wants a Rocket Ride, and then it goes out on, you know, Any Way You Want It, which is a little bit forgettable, but still pretty cool. You know, at this point, Bruce Kulick, he plays lead guitar on All American Man, Rockin' in the USA, and Larger Than Life. So Ace is kind of starting to have one foot out the door. That's Bob Kulick. Did I say Bruce? It's Bob Kulick on guitar here. Rest in peace, Bob. You know, this was sort of the beginning of the end in some ways. I saw an interview with Bob where he was talking about recording these parts on this album. And Ace was there, like Ace was in the studio, and Bob talks about how he recorded these parts, and he came walking out of the studio, and Ace was sitting in the lounge, and Ace looked at him and went, "Hey, Bobby, how did I sound?" And Bob looked at him and went, "Ace, you never sounded better." You know, so it was like, you know, it was just a known thing. And I think, unfortunately, after this 4 studio albums, solo albums came out after this, so that's maybe a topic for another video. But at this point, it doesn't get any better than this. They were the best, and you got it here on this record, Alive 2, an amazing live album that affected so many people that grew up in that. If you were a teenager or just a young kid in the era, you heard this album. You were affected by this album in one way or another. All right, so the definition of a legendary live album. All right, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of Kiss Alive 2. And until we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.